Yo, what is up guys, Grim here, and in today's video we've got some big news. Hoyo have just announced all of the characters for patch 1.3 that are almost certainly going to be coming out on the banners. The last of which, Lynx, was just announced, and they make for an absolutely insanely stacked lineup for free-to-play players. But the question remains, is it worth saving for them? And of course, hopefully I can arm you guys with a little bit more information to answer that question with this video and see if they're right for your account. Now, unfortunately, unlike past videos, I don't have any closed beta 2 footage to share with you guys, and I don't cover leaks. So here's what we're gonna do. I'm gonna arm you guys with what it would take for the character to be exceptionally powerful. We'll go over all of their potential team synergies and how they're gonna fit into your account and everyone they're up against. And as soon as you guys come across the information yourselves, you can evaluate them with all of these criteria and answer that question, are they right for you to save for? Of course, it goes without saying that looks and theme are number one, and you can clear the entire game with pretty much every character, especially if that character is a 5-star. But if you are interested in meta and power, let's dive into the video. So to give you guys the TLDR, 1.3's banners are looking absolutely stacked, especially for free-to-play players. The reason for that is that they've got an incredibly diverse roster on offer for us. So we've got Imbibitor Lunae, an imaginary destruction character. We've got Fu Xuan, a quantum preservation character. And most importantly of all, we've got Lynx, a 4-star abundance quantum character, giving us the full team building range here. No matter what you're missing on your account, it's likely 1.3 can get you what you need if you've got enough Jades spare. We've got a main damaging character, we've likely got a solo sustainer in Fu Xuan, and we have a free-to-play 4-star healer, hopefully easily accessible in Lynx, meaning you've got a good chance of getting a lot more progression out of your account. But the cherry on top is we'll likely get the 1.3 live stream before the most hyped banner of 1.2 ends, Kafka's banner. So you'll know exactly how good Kafka is if you save up your Jades and how all of these characters are going to function and play out, giving you the ultimate decision between Kafka, Imbibitor Lunae, Fu Xuan, and Lynx. Alright, so first up on the analysis list is Imbibitor Lunae, a 5-star imaginary destruction character who looks awfully familiar to someone already in the game, but we'll avoid spoilers to this story. With the information we have so far, we can cover viability, competition, and synergies. First up is viability. So in order for Mr. Lunae to be top tier by today's standards, if we want him to play by the current rules and he doesn't mix up the meta himself, he'd have to fit into some of the stronger ways people are building teams right now, which are hyper carry teams. Right now, a lot of players are favoring running teams with 1 sustaining character and 2 supports, sometimes swapping out one of the supports for an additional sustaining character if they aren't able to survive in the current fight they're up against. Now, if Mr. Lunae wants to be top tier, it would definitely help him if he could fit into this mold. And what is it which makes characters able to excel in these teams specifically, like characters like Sele and Genuine? Well, what would make Mr. Lunae particularly strong in these scenarios is his ability to capitalize on being that hyper carry target. Now, in order to do this, you need to be able to soak up all of the buffs from your team and then deliver the killing blow to the enemy effectively. And the tools you need to do that are pretty simple. You need to have a kit which is damage focused, of course, but ideally you'd have a kit which has incredibly strong single target, but also a little bit of area of effect present in it. That way, you don't have to focus on single targeting down smaller monsters and wasting your skills and ultimates on them, and you can focus the entirety of your time killing big elites, and then the smaller monsters or adds the boss summons die by virtue of existing. What's cool about Mr. Lunae here is he is the destruction path, and other destruction characters already are definitely sporting a ton of good single target and AoE, with likely the 2 ones he'll be up against being Blade and Clara for the destruction path. Now, Clara specifically excels in endgame right now. She has been proven to be a top candidate. And event banner characters generally surpass their standard counterparts in power by quite a lot. If we look at Sele and Yangqing, or Himiko and Jinyuan, they definitely took things a step up in terms of power. So I think that as a destruction character, he is very likely to have very good single target and is also very likely to have decent or strong area of effect. So just by virtue of being destruction, he has a very, very good chance of being an excellent hyper carry target. And if he takes the power level past what Clara is at currently, he is certainly very much going to be in a position to be top tier, and he'll fit very nicely into the way people are currently building teams with these hyper carry configurations. Next up is competition. If you're planning on running hyper carry teams, and that is also what is strong and most viable in the future, he's definitely up against quite a few candidates, as most hyper carry teams and endgame teams right now at least are running one primary damage dealer, meaning on your account for endgame you'd at most need 2 and a few extras if you wanted to maximize your damage against enemies' vulnerabilities. So let's say 3 or 4 if you wanted to swap characters in or out. So fortunately, Mr. Lunae here stands a little bit above the others thanks to his imaginary typing. He's only got one competitor for that typing, which is Welt. Now, Welt is an exceptional unit, but is not entirely focused on damage, meaning they are a little bit different in terms of what they bring. And if we're talking about raw damage output, I would hazard a guess that Mr. Lunae is going to be the superior damaging imaginary unit, at least at Eidolon 0. So he definitely does stand top of his class in that field, and that could be pretty coveted because imaginary is a very, very nice typing. But a lot of players consider a benchmark for damage dealers with their ability to ignore the enemy's typing and do what's called brute forcing, which means you can use, for example, Sele against all content, completely ignoring their vulnerabilities, and she'll smash it all. And that is a benchmark that is a lot harder to clear because he would be up against all the characters on this list in addition to Kafka and Blade. So if you already had Jinyuan and Sele and you were capable of brute forcing the entire game with those two characters and teams, well, Mr. Lunae would have to be substantially more powerful, or the game would have to change in a way that makes it much harder. So I would advise you guys to see what damage characters you already have built, and if you think he's going to be a step up, you can absolutely think about saving for him, and when we get more information we'll know. But if you don't need more damaging characters, it's likely you're probably going to have a lot more success with pulling for some more powerful support or defensive characters. But of course we have to see how his numbers turn out. Lastly is Synergies. So as the imaginary typing, Mr. Lunae has access to quite a lot of synergies already, the main one being Yukong. Now, if he ends up having some sort of big attack window or charged attack, Yukong is only going to be even better for him because Yukong specializes in buffing people up in a short window, and she's very good at that. And now that we understand her speed tuning a little bit more, at least I do, she's incredibly consistent at doing so. So she also has a bonus to that, which is exclusive for imaginary characters. She can boost up imaginary characters' damage substantially more than other elements, using one of her Ascension passives. In addition to that though, being imaginary, she can leverage the Planetary Rendezvous Light Cone to further boost up Mr. Lunae's damage, being an imaginary partner. So there is a lot of synergy between these two characters, so he has a built-in exceptionally strong support already in the game, which will be accessible for free in patch 1.2. For heavy spenders, there is of course also the Forks Imaginary team, where Silver Wolf will have a 50-50 shot or 100% chance to implant imaginary on any target she uses her skill on, further enabling all the imaginary shenanigans and really allowing you to get a lot of control over the enemy. And I imagine this one's definitely going to be a complete powerhouse when Mr. Lunae comes out. So should you save for Mr. Lunae? Well, if he has Lynx on the banner, he's already going to be a pretty attractive option. But if you already have two exceptionally strong damage dealers built, or have plans to build them, or are going for Blade or Kafka, he's definitely going to be lower on your priority list, no doubt. However, one of the most transformational changes and acquisitions you can make for your account is picking up those strong DPS characters, especially if they're capable of brute forcing content. It can really take your account from a 0 all the way to a hero where you're able to smash through content in record times. And no doubt, as an event banner 5-star DPS character, he is going to be perfectly fitting for that role. Next up is Fu Xuan, the 5-star preservation quantum character that is highly anticipated for her design, but also for her quantum typing. So let's dive into what it would take for Fu Xuan to be top tier for viability, who her competitors currently are, and of course what some of her potential synergies might be. Her viability is up first, so what's it gonna take for her to be top tier in terms of her defensive potential? Well, right now, as we learned earlier, most teams that are currently being played run 1 to 2 defensive characters. But the teams that do run 1 defensive character instead of 2 are definitely more powerful, but that defensive character needs to carry all that weight on their own and is generally going to have an exceptionally good gear set or a very strong kit. A good example of that is Luocha, but Bailu and Japad can also fulfill this role as well. And it's no coincidence these characters are all 5-star characters. So Fu Xuan out of the gate being a preservation character, unless she does something different like grant the team buffs or inhibit the enemy from doing stuff through break or something along those lines, a lot of people will likely expect her to do as well or better than the current preservation and abundance lineup. So Fu Xuan will likely be expected to solo sustain a team if that's the way her kit is designed. Now, preservation characters have quite a few quirks. Japad doesn't sustain the team the same as Luocha does. Preservation characters are generally superior for damage mitigation and of course shielding, but they aren't as good at keeping a team alive indefinitely as abundance characters. So even if Fu Xuan can't indefinitely keep a team alive, as long as she can keep them alive for an allotted period of time for you to clear the hardest content of the game, well, she's likely going to be top tier like Japad is right now, but they definitely have that bit of a disadvantage. Now, another angle for Fu Xuan could be an angle where miHoYo make the game significantly harder, where you do have to continue to run that double defensive lineup. So the game becomes harder, more damage comes in, and preservation characters, specifically strong preservation characters, have a bit of an edge here. Because abundance characters, you're generally not going to run 2 of them in the same team. But you would absolutely run an abundance and a preservation character in the same team. Similarly, if both preservation characters that you have access to don't shield specifically, that can also be a very good combination. So you could run double preservation, but you likely wouldn't run double abundance. So Fu Xuan could have a little bit more accessibility and viability there as well. What it's going to boil down to though is, can she solo sustain a team? Or do they make the game harder so that preservation characters are more in demand and she finds her niche there? Of course, she could also break the mold and offer something interesting and different, and that would also boost her viability a lot. Now, there is one other thing to discuss here, and that is the other expectation of these high-end game sustaining characters. The reason a character like Luocha stands at the top of the tier lists of everyone is because he does all the solo sustaining healing, but he does it without spending many skill points. So when Fu Xuan's kit is revealed or you come across it online, looking about how many skill points she might take to sustain the team in that solo sustaining fashion is also going to be a point where you guys can see how viable she'll be. If Fu Xuan can sustain the team with a neutral setup with only spending a skill point every now and then or not at all, then she's going to be top tier for sure. Or if she offers something new, unique and fresh, which other sustaining characters don't offer right now, chances are she's going to be top tier for that reason as well. Next up is competitors, which will largely dictate whether or not you're probably gonna wanna pull for her. So mostly all three of her competitors here, Gepard, Luocha, and Bailu, don't provide any extra bells and whistles. None of them are providing damage boosts and really any debuffs to the enemy. The exception to that is Luocha, who does bring a good amount of break to the team, so he can break for imaginary. He also has D-spells and cleanses, so he does have quite a lot of utility. But Bailu and Gepard are kind of there to solo sustain a team. Granted, they do it without spending too many skill points, but they don't bring a whole lot of anything else. Bailu does have a few defensive quirks here and there, but that's just about it. So Fu Xuan changes the game and breaks the mold and brings any sort of additional edge, whether that's break, debuffs, or buffs for your team. That's going to be a big point in her favor. However, if you already have two teams that are capable of solo sustaining themselves, maybe that's Gepard and Bailu, or Luocha and Bailu, then it's likely you're not going to have as much emphasis or interest in pulling for Fu Xuan unless they make the game significantly harder, or she can fill that bit of an extra mold breaking role where she does bring more to the table. Now, there is also the fact that she is coming alongside another 4-star healer in the game, Lynx, who will be available on one of these two banners, so that is also worth considering. However, one of the biggest investments and acquisitions you can make for your account is transitioning your teams from those double sustained setups with a preservation and an abundance to a solo sustained setup with just one abundance or preservation. It really does open up team building a lot for you. You can play a lot more fun compositions, include a lot cooler characters, and pull off a lot bigger combos. So if you haven't gotten to that point yet, she definitely could be an option, and the characters that are currently available are a little bit hard to get to because Bailu and Gepard are RNG acquisitions from the standard banner, and of course Luocha is only one man. And you can go with 4 stars and do that double composition, but right now at least they don't seem to have quite the edge unless you overgear them and have a good fight for them. I've seen Natasha do solo runs, I've seen March do solo runs, but they're not quite as effective as their 5-star colleagues, so it's likely Fu Xuan, if she can pull it off without spending too many skill points, has a pretty good shot. Next up is Synergies. So being a preservation character, she's likely going to fit into pretty much all of your teams, hopefully as a solo sustainer, but at worst as a preservation character that is going to make the team invincible and hopefully bring some extra bells and whistles. The cool thing about her though is she's one of the first quantum sustaining characters, finally enabling a very anticipated combo with Silver Wolf. Silver Wolf is a character that can implant a weakness based on your team members, and she is the quantum type. So with the release of Fu Xuan and Lynx, which we'll talk about, you can now build a team called Mono Quantum. So at its most defensive, you can build a team of Fu Xuan, Lynx, Silver Wolf, and a damaging quantum unit, perhaps like QQ or Sele. And this team right now is thought to be one of the strongest that you might be able to build. You've got exceptional defense, you've got omni coverage, always able to make the enemy weak to quantum, and you've got two of the best characters in the game for damage dealing, Silver Wolf and Sele. And if Fu Xuan brings the defense we need, that's likely it's going to be very, very strong. So should you save for Fu Xuan? Well, it's really going to come down to the kit for this one. We need to see if she can solo sustain, and if she can, how many skill points she spends. And then after that, we want to see if she's got any extra tricks like damage buffs for the team or debuffs for the enemy. In addition to that, if you already have Silver Wolf, pulling for Fu Xuan stocks goes right up there because you can create some pretty crazy synergistic teams. It remains to be seen just how worth Fu Xuan will be, but if she's anything like the other 5-star event banner character we've had for Sustain, Luocha, chances are she's going to be just as busted and really define the meta when it comes to defense. Lastly is Lynx, a 4-star abundance quantum character. Now, because we've already touched on Fu Xuan, who is preservation and the same element and in the same role as a defensive character, we're going to focus primarily on 4-star nature of Lynx and talk a little bit about what that means for how she's going to impact free-to-play players and of course what she adds to the overall patch 1.3 value for saving. So right now, if you're tackling endgame and you don't have Luocha, Bailu, or Japad, you're probably very familiar with Natasha and March 7th as two as your primary sustaining characters. And you've probably got a lot of mileage out of them so far. But through my own experience, and I'm sure yours as well, Natasha does feel like the stronger of these two characters here, at least for sustaining and healing the team as a free-to-play player. You can pair Natasha with Fire main character, and that can really get you through all the hardest content, no trouble at all. The problem was always with the second team and keeping them alive. Well, that's where Lynx comes into play. Lynx is likely going to be on the same power level in terms of healing or higher than Natasha, with her own gimmicks and things that make her unique. And because she's a gacha character, I think we can definitely assume she's probably going to be a little bit more powerful. So Lynx is going to put you in a position, if you acquire her, where you can now use Lynx on one side and Natasha on the other, and supplement both of these characters with your remaining two free preservation characters, Fire main character and March 7th. And I can definitely say, speaking from experience, combining two 4-star sustaining characters is pretty much always more than enough to get the hardest content in the game done, shifting your emphasis back over to your final support and damaging character. These characters can get it done, so Lynx should be the final piece of the puzzle for you to complete Memory of Chaos 10 on the hardest difficulty after you get your relics and characters leveled up, meaning she has an immense amount of value in terms of saving for and pulling for a free-to-play player. So this alone adds a ton of value to 1.3. Now the question is, whose banner is she going to pop up on? If she pops up on Imbibitor Lunae's banner, that is an ideal setup, because if you pull on him, chances are you're getting Lynx, maybe a few Lynx Eidolons. You're also getting a premium damage dealer, which is excellent, and that's going to solve one side of the equation, damage dealing for a team, and also another side, sustaining for the team, which is excellent. If she pops up on Fu Xuan's banner, that's going to be pretty interesting. Two characters that serve a similar purpose and of course are the same element. I'm questioning whether that will happen, but if that does happen, you can assess your possibilities there, and maybe you can even replace Natasha with that solo sustaining Fu Xuan if she can do that. The ideal scenario for free-to-play players would be if Lynx pops up on Imbibitor Lunae's though. But all that aside, if you don't want to pull either of the 5 stars, just want to build pity, you can pick up some Lynx copies, and that would be just fine as well. So Lynx absolutely will shake things up, especially for free-to-play players, but she also has some pretty unique synergies as well. As discussed earlier with Silver Wolf, if you already have Silver Wolf, she is going to be an excellent accompaniment to her as well. I'm not sure if Lynx will be able to solo sustain, so she might need a bit of help, but even that is going to be pretty excellent. Let me explain why. This also goes for Fu Xuan. Silver Wolf is going to apply her weakness based on all of the elements you have on your team, meaning if you can narrow it down to 2 elements, you got a 50-50 shot, which is exceptionally strong because this will allow you to build some pretty specific combos. So let's say you had Lynx as a free-to-play player and Silver Wolf, you could bring March 7th and a character like Yang Qing. There's your 2 elements right there. You could also bring a character like Himiko and Fire main character. There's your 2 sustaining characters, and there is your 2 offensive characters. So she really does fix up Silver Wolf's element matching issues and make Silver Wolf exceptionally stronger. So I am very excited for Lynx as a pay-to-play player and free-to-play player, and it's going to be interesting to see how powerful she comes out as, and also what gimmick they decide to give her. But overall, Lynx is a big part of 1.3 and why you might consider saving for this patch. To sum it up, I feel like 1.3 is one of the most diverse and safe patches if you're interested in spending your Stellar Jades. You've got a great free-to-play option, even if you don't want a 5-star in Lynx, an excellent damage dealer, most likely in Lunae, and you've got a potential wildcard exceptional preservation unit who might be a solo sustaining powerhouse with Fu Xuan, and a lot of synergies on the table with all of these characters with the existing roster. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this video, and until next time, cheers and good luck with your pulls.